In the previous video, I spoke a little bit about solo travel and how I use that to overcome depression as one of the tools. From my own experience of going through a very deep, dark depression in my life and coming out of the other side, I want to share with you like a different perspective. So my depression was onset from a challenging life experience. It happened in the workplace. I became very depressed. And what I've discovered is that depression is just a part of a transformation in life. And so the way that I see it is quite different to how like the medical world might see it. But from my own experiences, this period of time that I've had going through that experience was a lot like how a seed transforms into a tree. And so if you imagine a seed, it's going through this like blissful experience, and all of a sudden like life hits it, it falls down, and then it gets buried deep into the ground. And then it has to go through this period where the shell breaks, and it goes through this period of journeying in this void and grounding its roots down before it then journeys back out into the light and as its transformed self, right? A tree, a plant, whatever. And so these processes that happen in nature mirror the processes that happen within us. And so although physically it looks different, metaphorically, those experiences happen with us, within us. And it happens more on an emotional level, on a mental level, on a spiritual level. And what I found is that the journey looks a lot like a bliss phase, and then it goes down into what we call like a dark night of the soul. And so you're going through this really dark period of life. It's very like challenging. You're suffering a lot. And then you enter into what's called a void phase. And that's kind of when you're exploring, you've kind of hit your rock bottom. You've decided this is just something needs to change, right? And then from this void phase, you're navigating through. It takes a little bit of time. These things don't happen overnight, just like it doesn't happen in nature. Like you don't see plants, like seeds dropping into the ground, springing into trees overnight. Like it happens over time. And this experience also happens over time for us. And so although we're journeying through this darkness and we're journeying into this void phase where we might have people around, but we feel very disconnected, we feel very lonely, we're going through all of these internal emotions, and our mental health is affected. And then eventually we start to ground down, we start to learn tools, we're reaching out for support, or support is coming our way. And then eventually we go into a grounding phase where things are starting to settle, our emotions are starting to settle. And then we enter into this purpose phase, which is more embodying our new self, our transformed self. And so the way that I see depression is part of a process of transformation, especially when it's come from like a hard-hitting experience that kind of just knocks you out of life as you know it, right? And so I want to just kind of explain a little bit about how that journey might have looked for me, right? And so I went into this place of feeling very like angry, very emotional. I cried like a lifetime of emotions in the space of like 1 or 2 years. It went on for a while. And what I found especially was when I was going in and out of these different experiences, going to retreats, trying therapy, trying meditation techniques, like I tried a lot of stuff. And in this process of discovery, I was self-healing. I was going through this process of self-discovery, and I was also learning a lot, because in this experience, when you're not just trying to suppress them and turn your head away from dealing what's coming up, you're learning skills that you're going to take like through life. And I didn't go down the very traditional route of going to a doctor and getting medicated, because it didn't make sense to me to be medicated because I had a bad experience. Like that just didn't compute. And it didn't feel like I needed to go to a doctor just for them to tell me I'm depressed. Like, yeah, okay, like tell me something I don't know, you know? And so for me, that just didn't make sense. And I got to a point where I was feeling, it was like a 2-year process. I was feeling a bit apathetic at this point, and I did go to the doctor because part of this experience was like felt very heartbroken. Like my dreams had been shattered. I had lost a lot of like connections in my life, and it was just a really emotionally challenging experience. And it hit me really hard, like in my heart. Like I was getting a lot of physical symptoms in my heart. And so I decided to go to the doctor just to get it checked out, because at this point, like I was like, maybe I should just get it checked, make sure there's like nothing wrong there. And everything came out fine when it came to the actual physical side of things. But he did ask me a little bit about my mental health and how that was. And I was saying that I was just feeling very apathetic, kind of low energy, loss of motivation, like all of these kind of things. And he said like, oh, okay, well, there's 2 things that we can do. I can refer you to a therapist, or I can give you like antidepressants. And I understand the therapy side of things. Talking things through is always helpful. But when it came to the medication, like I couldn't help but dig deeper and ask questions. Very inquisitive and very curious. And by this point, I had read a lot of books like Lost Connection, The Body Keeps the Score. Like I had gained enough information to understand that actually like these medications aren't all what they're being sold to be. And I was asking like, okay, so like what's the purpose of these medications? Like what is it actually going to achieve if I was to take them? And he told me that it's, if I'm feeling like a bit like I want to leave this earth, basically, then it can bring my emotions to a place where I don't have those kind of urges. And also, if my emotions are really extremely up and down, then again, it will bring me down to a place of just like apathy, basically. And firstly, I wasn't in that place of wanting to do harm to myself. But my emotions by this point, like I felt like I was on the tail end of this experience. And so to take medications at that point, like seemed a bit pointless because I felt like I was coming out of it. But also I asked him, I was like, why would I take something that's going to bring me to a place of apathy when I'm already there? Like, why would that even be recommended? And so it's almost like blindly medicating without really understanding the problem, just because that's protocol when you hear someone is feeling depression. And how is bringing myself down to a place of apathy when, one, I'm already there, but also, if my emotions were a little bit all over the place, how is that going to bring me out of the experience if I'm only feeling numb and apathy? And so for me, it just didn't make sense. And so I'm sharing that with you because it's really important to actually ask those questions when you're having these discussions with your doctors and things like that, to make sure that what you are being prescribed is actually going to help you. And for me, in that experience, like it was a no. And so what I find is that when you go through these emotionally challenging experiences, I'm talking about not like clinical, like you've got a clinical problem, fair enough, like you go to the doctors, deal with that. But when it's from an emotionally charged experience, emotions act a lot like water. And so the way in which they are processed within our own physical bodies is a lot like water. And so imagine your emotions are like a lake, right? Or a pond. And you have this emotionally charged experience, which is like dropping a ton of bricks into this lake. What do you think the water is going to do? Like, how do you think the water is going to respond to that, to having a ton of bricks just drop into it? It's going to ripple effect, right? And in the beginning, it's going to be quite intense. It's going to go up, it's going to go down, it's going to go up, it's going to go down, like a lot, very, very intensely. And that can last as long as it needs to last for your experience. It can be a few days, a few weeks, months. In some cases, it can last a long time. It really depends on how hard hitting that experience was for you. And what you'll find is over time, like it will feel like it's never ending. This rippling effect is just never ending. But over time, it gets a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less. And then there's a reason why these experiences happen back to back with an experience that felt very blissful. And we'll have these blissful experiences, and all of a sudden life will hit us, and then we're like in the depth of darkness. And depression typically turns our head back. So oftentimes we become depressed because we're focused on the past. But there's a reason why our body is turning our head. Like, there's a reason why that's happening. Like, these things don't just happen just because they happen. Like, there's a reason for it. And there's studies that show, for example, like adverse childhood experiences, and how the more experiences, like traumatic experiences or tough experiences that you've had in your life, like if you've had like 4 or more than somebody who hasn't had those kind of experience, the stats show that you're 4.5 times more likely to become depressed in life at some point. And so there's a reason for that. It doesn't just happen because, well, it just happens. There are processes. Our body's trying to guide us towards healing something that's happened. And what I found was that the experience that I went through in this workplace environment was almost like an energetic blueprint of stuff that happened in my childhood. And so although my head was turning back, and for that initial like period when I was in this dark night of the soul, I was looking at this initial like this experience, and I was like trying to process it. I was like dwelling on it. I was like, that experience was so hard hitting. My nervous system just felt very stuck, and I was actually experiencing a lot of symptoms of like PTSD. I'm going to talk about that in a separate video because I think that's a separate topic. But I'm going to focus on depression for now. So what I found was that my head was being turned back. But when I was going through this experience, I was doing a lot of, or being brought to shadow work or inner work and inner child work, and like a lot of things that you can touch on in therapy, but also there's other means of seeking support for this. If you're kind of what I found initially when I was going through therapy was that it was great having somebody going through that experience with me, but there got a point where I was just kind of repeating the same story like over and over and over and over and over again. And it was like a broken record. Like, I was just stuck in this rumination of this experience because it was quite a shocking, traumatic experience for me at the time. And so I found that talking therapy got me to a certain point, but it didn't go far enough. Like I was just stuck in this storytelling. And it was only when I went to retreats where I started doing like more somatic work, body work. I started learning about the nervous system. I started learning about like calming the mind through meditation. All of these things that kind of took a more bottom-up approach. And also understanding how your memories and your emotions can arise, and then how to process them in a way so that you can come out of your experience. And so when your head is being pointed back, and it has come from this hard-hitting emotional experience, it can be so easy to get so stuck in this experience. But what I would encourage you is to seek help to look beyond that experience. And so when I started looking beyond that experience, started going like way back, like I said, it was like an energetic blueprint, like things that happened with my mother, things that happened with my father. I was a child of divorce, and that was a really hard-hitting experience. It was like the rug just got pulled from beneath my feet, and I didn't really process those emotions. And actually, by mirroring my parents, I learned to harbor my emotions and suppress my emotions. And so I went through a lifetime of suppressing emotions, and then now I went through this hard-hitting experience. It's like all of those emotions just came flooding out. And so there was a purpose for this depression. Like, I had to deal with a lot of stuff that I had been holding within me. And had that experience not happened, I'd probably still be holding all of that stuff in and being completely unaware. And so this experience has brought me to a much deeper level of self-awareness, and has taught me all of those tools and skills to deal with these things. And so I don't want to drag this video out too much, but if this is something that you are struggling with and you would like to do some of that work with somebody, I am trained in like shadow work. I am trained in even Reiki and energy work. I'm trained in meditation. I'm trained in coaching. And so if you are interested in reaching out to me, then I've got a link in the description below where we can have a chat and see how I can support you with that, because I know how challenging this experience can be, and how like on an emotional level, like it was worse. Like I've experienced cancer, and that was really physically challenging for like 2.5 years. Very, very physically painful. But emotional challenges like that, I mean, it can be just as painful. And so like I really empathize with anybody who is going through that. And like, if there is any way that I can help you, then yeah, please do reach out. So I'm gonna leave that there, and I'll cover some of the other topics in another video. So thank you for listening, and see you later.